Welcome back to the Good as Gold Stock Exchange, the series where we analyze Pokemon usage stats from official VGC tournaments. Today we move into a new format, Regulation I, where 2 restricteds are allowed per team, rather than just the one we saw in Regulation G. Since it's the first tournament of the format, we'll consider the most used Pokemon, as well as noting some of the differences from Reg G, as just adding 1 restricted to the team heavily skews the usage stats. Specific restricted pairings are also important to note, as restricteds that pair well together really make or break a team. We'll also take a look at some of the Pokemon's win rates as well as their usage rates, as some Pokemon that perhaps were quite frequently used may not have actually performed well at the event. So let's take a look at how the Milwaukee 2025 regional panned out. And before we get into it, make sure to subscribe. Looking at the restricted stats first, we see Miraidon take first place at this tournament, sitting at an incredible 35.2%. The highest any restricted seemed to hit last format was around 25%. It seems obvious that restricteds will have a higher usage this time around, but just seeing this huge difference is quite the feat to see. Shadow Rider, Koraidon, and Lunala bring up 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, each sitting at 28.7, 27.4, and 21.6% respectively. Ice Rider and Zamazenta are not far behind at 21.3% and 21.0%. All these Pokemon ran very similar sets to what they ran in Reg G, with a couple exceptions. Particularly Lunala had the biggest increase, and saw some good set variety. Although Calm Mindset was quite common in Reg G, 3 other sets have rose to prevalence in Reg I. Power Herb with Meteor Beam was the most common at around 70% of all Lunala running this. The other Lunala mostly ran leftovers, and some even had Electric Seed. Moongeist Beam, Moonblast, Wide Guard, and Trick Room were other very common moves seen on all 3 of these sets. Terra Fairy and Terra Water were the most common, as they're great defensive types and work great for Lunala, allowing it to get more use out of its Shadow Shield without having any 4x weaknesses. Electric Seed, as mentioned, made a significant showing in the top cut, as a number of strong players built together and came up with this as a winning set. Secondly, Miraidon sets remained pretty much the same, with 75% running the classic Choice Specs Terra Fairy. However, the same set of team builders that pushed Electric Seed Lunala clearly needed a partner to bring the terrain to trigger the seed, and that partner is Miraidon. However, rather than run the typical Choice Spec set, many of them ran Assault Vest and some even ran Choice Scarf, as both of these were seen more frequently in the top cut than Choice Specs. Both of these sets boasted Terra Electric rather than Terra Fairy. This allows it to get the same level of damage that the Choice Spec set has, although only with its electric moves. And since they don't have Terra Fairy, Dazzling Gleam's damage isn't as high, so they mostly dropped it for Snarl to get some more utility. AV sets were able to contend easier with other special attackers like Chi-Yu, Lunala, and Shadow Rider, while the Scarf set makes it easily the fastest Pokemon in the format, outspeeding all other common Scarf Pokemon, and even the fastest Mon in Calyrex Shadow. As mentioned, sets on the other top restricteds stayed pretty much identical to the Regulation G sets. We did see a big dip in usage from Zamazenta at 21% to Kyogre at 11%, with Ho-Oh, Zacian, and Terapagos also having pretty low usage. Here we can see the big gap between the top 6 restricteds and the rest, showing that this group are here to stay. Let's briefly also consider the most common restricted pairings. Calyrex Shadow and Zamazenta was the most common at 12.8%, Calyrex Ice and Miraidon was 2nd with 12.3%, Lunala and Koraidon was 3rd at 11.1%, and Calyrex Shadow and Koraidon was 4th at 7.4%. As you can see, these top 3 pairings are very close in usage, so when considering things to prepare for, focus on these as they are likely to continue doing well. These pairings all cover each other's weaknesses both offensively and defensively quite well. For example, Shadow Rider hits the Ghost types Zamazenta doesn't hit with Body Press, and Zamazenta hits the Normal and Dark types that Calyrex Shadow can't. Miraidon and Calyrex Ice Rider have the classic Bolt Beam coverage, as it's incredible offensively, and it allows the team to have both a slow mode and a fast mode. Calyrex Shadow Rider and Koraidon, and Lunala and Koraidon, have similar type synergies to that of Calyrex Shadow and Zamazenta, but they enable more non-restricted teammates than Zamazenta does. Koraidon, for example, sets the Sun for Paradox Pokemon, and Lunala allows a Trick Room mode on those teams. Going forward, I would also expect to see more Miraidon and Lunala, as this was a very unique pairing that performed well specifically in the top cut, despite being uncommon overall. And due to its success, others are likely to start picking up the team. Looking at our regular Pokemon, we see substantially smaller usages than last format, as a 2nd restricted is eating that team slot that some of these Pokemon used to fill. To no surprise, Incineroar and Urshifu take 1st and 2nd at 31.3 and 27.4%. A big difference from the last tournament, where we saw our grass types, Ogerpon Hearthflame, Rillaboom, and Amoonguss, frequently fight for 3rd and 4th, we see Iron Hands jump up to 3rd place at 24.5%, and Fluttermane takes 4th with 22.5%. These 3rd and 4th places also make a lot of sense. Seeing as Miraidon was the most common restricted, Iron Hands is an incredible partner, allowing it to get an attack boost from its Quark Drive ability, and it has a great matchup into many other restricted. And thanks to its raw bulk, it's often able to eat very powerful attacks that other Pokemon just can't. And Fluttermane is a great partner for Koraidon, as it, again, can hold an item and activate its photosynthesis. Rillaboom made its way into 5th, but Amoonguss and Hearthflame dropped significantly, down to just 9.7 and 9.2%. With Miraidon being the most used restricted, these changes make sense. Rillaboom is the only grass type that can really check Miraidon defensively, as it can remove the electric terrain that provides so much of Miraidon's power. Although Ogerpon Hearthflame was frequently run on Miraidon teams, you might have expected it to have higher usage as well, since Miraidon usage is up. But in the transition to a double restricted format, Hearthflame seemed to be the most expendable Pokemon on that team archetype, as it most frequently got replaced for a second restricted. Amoonguss has also been overshadowed by Brute Bonnet, as more Koraidon around means more sun, means more photosynthesis boosts for this ancient mushroom. It also has better type matchups against restricteds, and better stats overall than Amoonguss. The other top 20 common Pokemon remained pretty common and overall ran the same movesets for the most part. For this week, our prime pick is Landorus Incarnate, with Miraidon being the most common restricted. The obvious answer is a ground type, and the only two candidates at the moment were Landorus and Ursaluna. Ursaluna actually performed incredibly well at this event, boasting a 58% overall win rate, the highest at the event. But it has a 50-50 matchup with Iron Hands, as both hit each other super effectively, and being at the same speed stat, it often comes down to speed ties which one of these will prevail. Landorus, however, resists Iron Hand's fighting moves and its occasional steel moves while still being immune to its electric attacks. Its powerful Earth Power and Sandsear Storm deal huge damage across the board and hit many top Pokemon like Miraidon, Zamazenta, Iron Hands, Chi-Yu, and Incineroar super effectively. Not to mention, it hits many restricteds after they terrestrialize into their common Terra types, like Koraidon and Calyrex Ice Rider terrestrializing into Fire, and Lunala and Miraidon frequently terrestrializing into Fairy, which Landorus can threaten with a Sludge Bomb. Overall, this first tournament of Regulation I was quite a chaotic one, and hopefully the metagame settles down a bit, but at least having this baseline will give us something to build against moving forward. Thanks again to all the patrons for supporting the channel, and thank you for watching.